Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our talk called National Nature Parks for Malta, How to Save Our Countryside. My name's Tamsin. I'm the events officer at Majjistral Park. And I'd just like to say to everybody that everybody is muted at the moment and your video is switched off, although you of course have the option whether to switch that on. If you could keep yourselves muted for now, it would be much appreciated, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end of the online talk. We do have the chat function, so if you do want to post a question before the talk has ended, please feel free and I'll make a record of the question. The presentation will be recorded, so if you don't want to be on the recording, please switch your video off and you won't be on the recording. It should last for approximately 40-45 minutes, and then it depends on how many questions and answers we have at the end and how long that takes. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, and that's Mr. Martin Galia from Dinlight Helwa, and who's also a member of the Heritage Parks Federation who manage the park. And I will hand over to you now, Martin. Thank you.
So the talk today is really, how national parks can help us save our countryside. As you know, the country has very limited space. We are very overpopulated, and as you can see from the photo, we have very poor planning skills in this country, and there are possibly the main reason is because there is a lot of pressure on the land. We know that there has been a building boom since the 60s, okay, almost continuously. The land and property has consistently given a very good return to investors. So anyone who bought a piece of land in the late 50s or early 60s is sitting on a fortune today. So, it is a very attractive investment, and therefore people prize land very highly. Let's see. I think also, the pressure on land has been driven by an increased standard of living. What's happening here? Hold on a sec. Yeah. Sorry about this. The need for good housing, obviously. I think tourism has also put a lot of pressure on land. Stunningly, 170,000 tourists came to Malta in 1970, and there were over 2.7 million in 2019. So, that shows the pressure that industry alone has put on land. And also, obviously, when I was born around 1960, okay, there were only 326,000 people living on this country, obviously, in perhaps a lot of them in sub-housing tenancies and things like that. It went up to 405 in 2005, and in the last 10 years, 15 years, it's actually gone up to 480. So it's really, increasing exponentially. And what about planning? I think planning is still in the hands of politicians. They seem to be very susceptible to the powerful lobbying groups who tend to dictate planning policy to a greater or lesser extent. I think the developers lobby has a huge influence, as does the hunting lobby, whilst the environmentalists tend to be smaller, more fragmented. Perhaps we don't cooperate enough together, and we don't get the traction required to force the serious planning we do deserve. And whilst the PA has a lot of talent within the organization, and it has good dedicated staff, the results aren't there to be seen. And I think, too little protection has been given to UCAs or the ODZs, which remains rich pickings for speculators. And sometimes speculators, we tend to think of them as, the few very rich or very influential developers, but it could be just a man living in a street who wants to develop his house in a terraced house street, who'd want to develop his house into a block of flats, or he's got a room out in the countryside and he wants to develop that. And obviously that means a lot of money for him. So, he'll be pushing very hard to do that. And whilst our GDP has skyrocketed, I think our quality of life has improved, that's for sure. I think it could have improved more, if we had, looked after our planning better. I think we would have much less pollution, much better living spaces, and much more countryside and natural and cultural assets. I know they're very bad pictures, but this is Majjistral, and there are 3 photos. They're aerial photos taken. The first one in 1957, so that's just about when I was born, 59. And you can see it's almost all countryside. There's very little development at all around Majjistral. So it would have just been along the inside of the bay around here. Okay, and all here, Siberia, as they call it, is nothing. By 1988, so the inner part of the bay has almost been totally developed on both sides and stretching further inland. And obviously by 2004, where here wasn't built, it's now totally built, going back further and all the way out. So you can see the impact in one lifetime on the built heritage of Malta and the pressures on land around. But perhaps, you're thinking, what has this to do with national parks? Well, if we go back a bit, you will remember that in the early 2000s, there was a move to turn Shar al Hamra into a golf course. And the industry at the time, the tourism industry, said that this was vital for the country to survive and to maintain its tourism industry. And there were at least 3 major proposals at the time for golf courses, including one at Tachench, which we had stopped, also one at Rabat, and another one at Shar al Hamra. And obviously all the, these proposals took out large areas outside the development zones. They would generally have to be landscaped with turf and grass. So they require a lot of water. And obviously the developers would then make their money, not from the golf, but from the apartments and the hotels, which would have to be built around the golf course for them to make their money. So these were, really very large developments, and obviously they all had to take up part of the countryside. Obviously, the environmental organizations were very upset about this. They made their objections. They made their objections to MEPA at the time. We had meetings with the ministers. There were street protests, on television, writing in the papers, and all the things which we normally do. It seemed that there was no real appetite, I think, by the man in the street for the proposal anyway. And at the same time, Helwa started, putting a proposal together to turn not just Shar al Hamra, but perhaps a lot of the northwest coast as a national park. And we got Antoine Gatt to make a report, and we had all the maps and the plans and delineated the areas, and had meetings with the Prime Minister, and I had meetings with George Pulicino at the time. And we also, in parallel with that, started going on television, on the press, on the morning shows, the breakfast shows, on the radio, pushing this concept of having a national park. And I don't know, it seemed to have struck a bit of a chord, because just before the 2007 election, the Prime Minister, Lawrence Gonzi, and the Minister of Environment, George Policino, announced that the golf course would not be built and that a national park would be, they said, built there instead. So, and I think, that was a huge win because, as you know, we don't get many wins in the environment lobby. There tend to be few and far between. But this one, this was an extract from the Times. It said the government had decided not to go ahead with the planned golf course at Shar Al Hamra and will instead build a nature and history park, which will be 5 times the size of Valletta, the Prime Minister announced today. It will be the second major green decision in days, having on Thursday decided to abruptly stop bird hunting in spring after protected birds were shot down. That has since been repealed anyway. But, we were very, very happy about that. And it was done with due fanfare. There was, you can see Vince signing the paper, Vince Uptart of BirdLife, signing the paper in front of the Prime Minister and the Minister of the Environment. You can see them walking around the park over here. And this was the first board we had under Dr. Stanley Zammid. This was the first Majjistral board. So it was set up by a legal notice. The area is about 2.6 square kilometers. It starts here. This is the Gaia area, but this from here all the way down to Popeye Village is the Majjistral Park, as most of you would know. But it was set up, I think, in a sort of ad hoc way. I don't think too much thought was put into it at the start. What happened is that it was done just before the election, and so they needed to move quite fast, and they wanted to roll it out before the election. So the structure is that the park is managed by an NGO called the Heritage Parks Federation, in fact, not foundation. And it's a registered NGO, and it's made up of 3 NGOs, which is Helwa, Nature Trust, and the Gaia Foundation. Okay, so they are the park managers. And the government gives the manager an annual grant of about 70,000 euros a year. And we prepare annual audited accounts and we make them publicly available on our website. Okay, and then the manager, so the Heritage Parks Foundation, then reports to the Majjistral board. And what we do is we have to give them our budget, tell them how we're going to spend the money, as well as how we've actually spent it the year before. We also need to prepare conservation plans, how we intend to carry out the conservation for the forthcoming year. It's a rolling plan, and what we've actually done in each particular year. And we need to report on all other activities that are going on with the park. So the Majjistral board effectively acts as a manager, as a supervisor rather. And it's composed mainly of a chairman and representatives from ERA, the Environment Resource Authority, the Maleha Local Council, and 3 representatives appointed by the minister. So those are all appointed by the minister, except for the local council in their own right. And on the other side, there are, if you'd like to say on the other side, there's the representatives of the Heritage Parks Federation, which is Helwa, Nature Trust, and the Gaia Foundation. So the board would receive the input from the board received the input from the Heritage Parks Foundation as regards the budget, as regards the plans. They would discuss it and they would approve it. The Majjistral board then needs to report to the regulator. In this case, it would be ERA, the Environmental Resources Authority, who's the final arbiter on anything connected with conservation. So what have we saved? And I think, every time I see the pictures, it really is a stunning piece of land. And we were all very happy to have played a small part in trying to retain this beautiful piece of land. Um, it's not a large piece of land, and obviously we'd have liked it to be much, much larger, because the coastline on the northwest really has a lot to save, and is really under threat. So, but the area we have saved does have a lot of flora. It's got a lot of heritage. It's got some built heritage. There's the barracks there, which is a military installation. There are some giren. There's a small tower. And obviously there's a lot of flora and fauna, which are, I think, inestimable. And it's an area which is used a lot for people going for walks, for cycling, off-roading if you want, trail running, obviously swimming down at the two beaches over there. And it really, and horse riding, and as well as other perhaps things which we would not rather have, like driving around or off-roading. Anyway, the Heritage Parks Fund Federation has a few employees, very, very few, around, I think, the equivalent of 4 full-timers, okay? And this is a picture of them. They're all very, very keen, and, they do a lot of work, and I think far in excess of what we would expect from just their normal salary. So, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank them publicly for this. But they're very dedicated. They work with passion. It's tough work. It's tiring work. It's not only sitting at a desk and writing the reports and all that sort of thing, but it's also a lot of physical work, removing alien species, removing rubbish, trying to stop people from driving around on motorbikes and things like that. So, what have we done in this last 10 years? Because this is about 10 years since it's been set up. Well, we've taken out thousands and thousands of tons of rubbish and debris. We've removed illegal structures. We've rehabilitated the landscape, planted trees and shrubs, and we've removed alien species. We've rebuilt rubble walls and pathways. We've built a visitor center by rehabilitating one of the military barracks. We've removed squatters from the barracks at Aintafiha. We patrolled the park to reduce abuse. We promoted the park to ensure it's appreciated and therefore protected. Educational talks, walks for students, children's families, as well as tourists. We've done a few publications and organized CSR events for companies and groups of people. And we've monitored the site, so we have to have environmental and conservation reports for the Environmental Resource Authority. And as I said earlier, this is all done with less than 4 full-time equivalents, but we do tend to rely on volunteers. So we're always looking out for people who can come and help. Recently, we had some people from Meleha who will be perhaps taking more active role in this work. So, what are our plans? I think one of the things we really need to do, and we haven't been working hard enough at it so far, is to become self-sustainable. I do grumble that the grant from the government is too low at 70,000 euros, but really in the end we need to wean ourselves off the money the government gives us, because I don't think it's particularly healthy. There are many reasons, I'm sure you can think of them, but I don't think it's very healthy to rely on the government for funds. Perhaps the biggest task we have is to rehabilitate the barracks. There are, 17 buildings, and we would want to turn those into accommodation for students, for young students, so they could have live-ins while perhaps studying as Villa Saigon. Perhaps some of you knew that, which used to happen for secondary students, secondary education students would go and spend 2-3 days out in the countryside in proper accommodation. We would want a hostel over there as well for younger people who would travel to Malta, and that could earn the park some money, a cafeteria, visitors accommodation, because there is an officer's quarters. It's like a villa, and there's a small farm. We call it the farm, and you could have accommodation similar to the Landmark Trust has in the UK. These are small properties where the building is respected, and you're able to, with the money, maintain the building and perhaps plow some money back into the park. We're also looking to have a small sports club, just a place for the sportsmen to meet, where before or after they go mountain biking or trail running or swimming, they could meet, plan their events, and have a place where they can congregate afterwards. So that's a huge job, which is budgeted over 2 million. So I think there we're looking for EU funds, and we're putting a proposal as we speak, and hopefully we'll get it in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think we need to step up our tours and to make the park a must for foreign visitors. I think the tourism product over the winter and shoulder months isn't very good in Malta, and I think we have a lot to offer in by way of walks in the countryside and our natural and cultural assets. So I think we need to develop our links with the hotels and operators and step that up. Also to schools, obviously that's pretty obvious. I think camping is now becoming an issue with the government giving away a lot of land to the hunters at Mizip and Ahrash, where people used to camp. We're finding that there's a lot of pressure for us to make space available. I think this can be done with a limited impact on the park, and if it is managed, it would have very low impact and could be a source of revenue for the park as well. So this is these are the ways we would like to wean ourselves off the government subsidy. And I think what's key for us as well is that we want the park to grow. For us, it's an ambition. We want to save the countryside. We can see how we have fended off a lot of pressures in the past, and if we are able to extend the boundaries of the park, we will be in a better position to protect the countryside. What are the issues? I mean, it hasn't been an easy ride. One of the main problems is we haven't been able to put gates at the park, and so cars still drive through the park. You'd say this is it should be very simple to fix, but unfortunately we've run into a brick wall from the local council. I think they look to their constituents who want to go in for various reasons, including to the boathouses below, and we haven't been able to resolve this particular issue yet. So that's one of the issues we have had. I think there's a continual lobbying by the hunters to increase the use of the park. I mean, initially when we had set up the park, it was only allowed till 9 o'clock in the morning. Then it was extended to 10:30. Now it is at 12:30, and I wouldn't hold your breath to see if it's increased any further. The grant needs to be increased. We don't have any enforcement power, so our rangers have no executive power to stop anyone from doing anything. We can only ask them to and phone the police. And obviously by the time the police come, normally they're long gone. And a particular problem I think we've had is that ministers tend to be, how can I say, they're not thrilled with the environment ministry, some of them at least, and they tend to change before they get to grips with all the issues we have and we're trying to get resolved through the ministry. So that's some of the problems we've had. And we need to take over the site managed by Guy, which I showed you on the map before. And obviously, this is all in addition to the normal problems we have with site management, like dumping, off-roading, and unsavory characters doing things they shouldn't in the park. When we were setting up the park, we had looked at what they did around the world, and there are some interesting facts. Yellowstone's the oldest in 1872, and the UK only in 1949 passed the National Parks Act, which is quite, at least to me, it was quite surprising. And the Peak District was declared a national park in 1951. Now, I think it's important to say something about the Peak District is that most parks are not owned totally by the government. So if you go to the Peak District, a lot of land, and there are a lot of houses, pubs, hotels, in the Peak District, and they are not government property. So you can have a national park in an area which has private property within it. The main overriding factor is that there's a presumption against further development. So I think that's something we haven't really understood in Malta, because we still think that if you have a national park, it needs to be government land only. Belize has 38% of its property, so that's the country which has the most area covered by a national park. Whereas France, UK, New Zealand, and Chile, and many other countries have about 10% and just over 10%. Majjistral is about 0.5%. I think now there's a Naidra Park, and so perhaps we're slowly getting our act together. Abroad, most parks are government funded. I think the Americans have led the way again. They've, in Yellowstone, they have an entrance fee. I think you pay about $30 to go in with your car. And some countries like Costa Rica actually received international funding to fund their national parks. And it was mainly due to protecting the rainforests. I think Germany was one of the major contributors. But I think when the financial crisis came along, this was reduced, and the issues of deforestation, etc., substantially increased. So it was a tenuous source of funding in any case. Obviously, the amount of visitors is staggering. In England, there are over 110 million visits to the national parks annually. And I can't tell you how many come to us, but there is a steady stream going through the park, especially during the shoulder and winter months. And I think we've come late to the table. We were one of the last countries to introduce national parks. But I think we can still shine by introducing a proper system, and we can, really reap the benefits of seriously protecting our cultural and natural assets in the countryside. I don't need to go into the benefits of, having a national park, but they're pretty self-evident. If we want to go at the highest level, we're helping slow climate change, and we're protecting biodiversity. And they are very biodiverse in Malta. You would be surprised. And I think there have been a few lectures on this series of lectures on the subject. But obviously there are educational, water conservation, there's agriculture, tourism and related employment, mental health, education. And obviously we need to manage our Natura 2000 sites. It is an EU obligation, and we're not really doing that at this stage. And I don't need to go into the normal threats where there's land speculation, farming in the wrong places, dumping, off-roading, trampling, cutting vegetation, etc., etc., etc. About 2-3 years ago, Dr. Petra Bianca and I had put together some sort of proposal where we wanted to have a formal structure for the national parks, and we published a small book on it. And what we wanted to do was to have a system where the site managers, let me see how I say this, that the general conservation would fall under ERA, as it is now, as the regulator. Natura Malta, and I think there is Ambient Malta, but it's slightly different to what we were proposing. They would be the government body who would identify sites which needed protection. So they would go around most of the Northwest. You can go to Selmoon and all these areas and say, okay, these need managing their very high cultural and natural value, very high landscape value, and we need to protect them. So they would form part of the national park system. And Natura Malta would identify these sites. And then the site managers could be anyone. They could be NGOs, they could be government entities, they could be individuals who would take over the site. They would sign a contract with Natura Malta, and they would manage the site in accordance with that contract. So obviously, they couldn't build anything, but they would make sure that the site is managed in the best according to best conservation practice. And Natura Malta could also possibly help by providing some resources, because sometimes you do need heavy equipment. They might be able to provide some grants and things like that. But the site managers would generally be NGOs, individuals, companies, or even some government entities. So that's the way we envisaged having a national park system around the country, which would protect our natural assets. However, today is a bit of a mishmash, and I think they need to look at it properly and look at it holistically and have a proper system of management to look after our countryside. So I think there are many NGOs who are keen to help. There are many examples where this has been done successfully by BirdLife, by the Helwa, by Gaia, by Nature Trust, among others. There are others as well. Funding always is a problem. It's not only a local issue, but it's also something where it's a big issue abroad. But I can tell you that NGOs achieve a lot more with a lot less. Okay. And this is done mainly through the leverage that we get from our volunteers, and we're able to get CSR and donations from individuals and companies, which help us achieve our aims. And so we need to. I think the imperative is that we need to increase the area which is managed as a national park. It remains, as we saw in the beginning, under a lot of threat. You see a lot of structures. I don't know how many of you go out in the countryside and how often, but whenever you go out, you see new structures going out. They could be inverted commas reservoirs. They could be tool rooms. They could be farms. There's always something happening. Road widening. And I don't think we're looking at our natural assets properly. So, we would have said that if you look at the whole of the Northwest, that could very easily be a one national park system. And we were also looking at this area here, which is near Selmoon, which could also, be joined to it. So that, I think, is almost a no-brainer, because it's incorporating Dingley Cliffs, you've got Busquet, you've got Vitisuri, and all here, Ras El Pellegrin, and all these beautiful sites. And as you can see from the picture here, the rest of Malta is almost totally built up. So we're looking at the last scratches of our countryside to be protected. And of course, I haven't even started talking about Gozo, which is really in the spotlight of developers at the moment, and needs its countryside and its urban conservation areas to be protected. To do this, we need our volunteers. We do have a system of volunteers. These are some CSR events we've carried out for companies, but also we're looking to have regular volunteers as rangers, either to help with the patrolling or to, the sort of more heavy work like removing alien species, rebuilding rubble walls, which we need help to maintain the area. So do reach out to us, visit our parks, and be a part of saving our heritage. So that's it from me. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was really interesting, and it's always great to hear the success story of Majjistral Park. It never gets old, and hopefully it will give an example to people that we can create more park area, like you said. Yes. So if anybody has any questions, there haven't been any posted in the chat, but if people want to unmute themselves and ask questions, please feel free. Or if you have any suggestions, or if you do want to get in touch with us, our email is info@majjistral.org, or you can get in touch with me. I'm the events officer at the park, and it's walks@majjistral.org. And we are doing these online sessions once every month. So we have different topics every month. So if you have any suggestions, or if you want to take part in any of them, that would be great, as long as it's an environmental topic to do that's associated with the park. So you just send me an email at walks@majjistral.org. And
hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
My name is Vittorio. I just wanted to ask if you had any plans of trying to populate the main area of Majjistral, because recently you had removed, I believe, a couple of acacia trees, and I saw the craziness that unfolded on Facebook. I don't know if that was recently. A couple of
acacia trees.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it possible to populate that area with certain trees or certain other plants, or is it just too difficult because of the wind?
Shall I take this, Martin, or?
Well, I thought Darren's here. He's the conservation officer. Maybe he can.
I don't know, but basically in that area, those acacia trees shouldn't have been there. They were planted. Yeah, I don't know if Darren does want to answer, but in the meantime.
Oh no, I completely understand why they were removed. Don't get me wrong. I just was wondering because I see the point the speaker was giving about attracting tourism to Majjistral, and it does have great potential. It's just the main area. I've noticed when I recently went to clean some invasive species as well. It's just the main area seems a bit, it wouldn't interest certain tourists, so I was just wondering maybe if
Victoria, where are you saying exactly the main area?
As soon as you go, yes, exactly.
Okay.
That kind of it looks personally,
it's
at least to
bare.
me.
Yes, you're right. It does.
That's it.
So we do have it's
Hi.
four afforestation projects. So we're
Hello.
Hi, Darren. Hi. Would you
Hi.
like?
Hello all.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would like to say a couple of words. The acacia trees. It's a constant task which we are doing, controlling invasive species. Acacia is one of them mainly. Yet we do compensate by planting every year. To the area then. Let's say last year we planted about 750 in Nahalia, which is an area which we're afforesting at the moment. It's part of the afforestation project at the park.
I think, Darren, we had spoken about the area where the shooting range is, and I think that is one area we do have in our site. It's a bit of a problematic area because it, as you said, Victoria, it is very windswept, and so I think we'd have to build up shrubs and then sort of develop into trees. But it's a long-term problem. But I think you're right; it does look very bare and disturbed, I think, So I
For
don't agree.
sure. It's just when I've taken some of my foreign friends there and showed them like, look, this is our nature park here. They're like, okay, it seems quite basic,
And it's just at the entrance. So,
And I know I don't mean it as a negative thing. Don't get me wrong. I
No,
understand the
no,
situation
honestly.
it's in, but it's just a point. So things are being done in to sort of I don't want to say repopulate, but
Yeah.
beautify that area a bit.
Maybe we should step it up. I think you're right.
Okay.
That area is difficult though for other reasons as well, because of all the impact from human activities. With people like to come in with their cars to that area, and it's difficult to start conservation project, but we're working on it. And I would take your friends to below the cliffs, because that's just stunning.
No, I have for sure. I've gone all the way in the area with them.
That's when it gets serious.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if are there any other questions from anybody?
Hello.
And sorry.
Sorry, was that
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Vittorio. Basically, I want to ask how to get the authorities, or an authority or an entity to obviously take action on certain criminal activities regarding the environment. What I mean is there a structural way how a citizen in Malta, can tackle, and bring enforcement in an area? So, for example, in case of our Lapsi, I'm saying if there's an area, you send to local council, your local council, they tell you, we don't know the owner of the area because it's private, but we don't know the owner. All right, so it's like mela. Obviously, the criminal activities will continue because no one knows the owner. Mela, there's a problem. If you see construction waste in the valley, it's not us, it's Malta Parks. No worries, I send Malta Parks. If you send the Malta Police Force any reports, you want to go to court, or inkella we just speak to him and we tell him. Tipo, tipo, for a car which is not within the lines in the parking area, you get a ticket immediately for something, an environmental criminal act, and you find, that is you find the real proof. You find, for example, the airport, Malta airport ticketing, where you have the time, you have CCTV, which is in the last week, for example, someone threw something. Construction waste, for example, you find the invoice, you find his business card. This is not something, it's a proof. You cannot go wrong with it. You find as well a receipt, where he bought, for example, pastizzi in the morning. These are things which can be related to. Is there a structural way, how as a national park, you tackle these things? It's very
Well, I think that's what you said. The whole point is, if you don't have the area managed, then abuses go unchecked. Okay. We've seen this all around the countryside. They dump rubbish by the truckload and nothing happens. I won't say there's no political will from the government, and it could be any government. What I'm saying is that it's not high on their agenda. Okay. So they're not particularly bothered. And to tell you the truth, nor are the Maltese people. So it's not something that bothers the Maltese people in general. And so the politicians don't see it as something where, they're going to make progress and get a pat on the back. And I think that's part of the problem. So if the areas are managed, and this is why we're trying to push for park system, if the areas are managed, then we have patrols, we have people going around checking the areas, we have cleanup, so where it's quite clean, people don't tend to dump. So, if you have all these things in place, then you're already, far ahead. That's not to say we don't have these problems, but we have them much less now, I think.
Personally, I'm a person that, all right, I do cleanups, but I believe that we should target that no one does any more cleanups. A cleanup is not something which you need to
Yes,
do
yes,
currently.
absolutely.
It's a protest, actually. It's an act of protest. It should be an act of protest. The government should not have people cleaning up after other people. All right, maybe we should have green Malta and not,
You're quite right.
pick up rubbish of other people who
But
make
we're not
these.
there yet.
Ma,
Yeah. We have to live in reality.
I'm still trying to figure out a system of how to get people enforcing in an area. Because
Well, we can have. I mean, there was the ALE. Now the minister wants to have a new system of rangers. I think every new minister comes up with new ideas, with new bodies, new organizations. And then we have so many organizations. I think it's not true. I think the easiest would be, our view would be to give our rangers executive powers, and then we could find someone on the spot. That would be the easiest. But we haven't been able to persuade them.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. We've had another question from somebody asking us to talk about the projects that we have for volunteers this year that volunteers can get involved with. I don't know if you want to take that question or I can go into it.
Go ahead.
So we're just starting a new volunteer program at the moment, and that's going to involve different responsibilities for different teams of people depending on what they're interested in. So we're going to have more patrolling of the park. So that involves going up to people, welcoming them, giving them any information they might need, and giving them. It's basically based around education about nature and our historical heritage. So, and then there'd be monitoring of any human activities that are happening and reporting this to a system that we would have at the park. So we'd then be able to collate that information. We're also going to have wildlife crime monitoring as well, or wildlife crime rangers. So we're going to have somebody heading up that team, and we're going to organise training sessions about that. So any illegalities that shouldn't be happening in the park, there is a set of site regulations that should be obeyed, which mean that certain things are illegal in the park. So that needs to be monitored, and that would involve confronting and going in a diplomatic way, of course, but there will be training about that. And again, it's basically about protecting our natural and historical heritage. When we have most of Malta built up, we need to protect these precious areas of countryside that we have left. And then there's also the regular activities that we'll be organising throughout the year, hopefully once or twice a month. This is all COVID dependent, of course. We're just monitoring the situation, but it looks like we're going to be okay if we have small teams. And the activities usually focus on cleanups. There isn't that much to clean up in the park, but there are certain areas that do need some attention in terms of cleaning up. Like Martin mentioned earlier, there are dumping sites that have been used for a long time, unfortunately. So we're working on clearing these areas, and it does take a few visits a lot of the time. So we do need volunteers for that. Removing invasive species, so acacia trees, fountain grass is a bit of a problem at the moment, and it's been growing on the cliff side. So we actually had some mountain climbers help us out with that, which Vittorio came came and did that with us too, so that was great. And monitoring paths as well, and so making sure that the pathways are safe and clear of any litter, because we want the park to appear in a good state to all visitors. And possibly some rubble wall building. So at the moment we're rebuilding the rubble walls. There's been a lot of rubble walls that have been knocked down. So that's an activity that we're hoping that the volunteers can help out with as well. And again, with the paths, we have a bit of a project happening at the moment where we'd like to. There's too many paths in the park at the moment. So some paths are being closed off so that then they can be ecologically rehabilitated. So it means that plants can thrive again, and biodiversity that depend on those plants can also thrive and won't be trampled by vehicles. Or hopefully we're going to stop vehicles coming into the park, but like mountain biking and those kinds of things, they will have their own established trails. So I hope that's enough of an explanation about the volunteer project. I've put my email address in the chat, so I'll repeat it again, walks@majjistral.org. If you're interested in volunteering with us, please send me an email. My name's Tamsin, and yeah, we'd be grateful to have your help. So I don't think. Oh, and there was another question about age restrictions in joining the volunteer project. There aren't any age restrictions. If people are under 18, they can join in as long as they have a responsible adult with them. We are going to be working with systems of knowledge students as well. So in that case, we would have an agreement with them. So yes, that's fine. We don't have any children orientated activities at the moment in terms of volunteering, but it's something we're working on as well in the future plans. Okay, I don't know if I'm just checking the chat to see if there's any other questions. I think there's a conversation going on about tree planting.
As well, can I ask another question? Is Majjistral Park, will you as a Majjistral Park make some, or there's already public consultation on the waste management plan, all right? Are you going to, consult anything enough regarding maybe enforcement or any way how to deal with such littering and dumping of waste, or you're not going into that field?
Well, generally, things like waste management would be the NGOs as themselves, as Helwa would do on its own, Gaia and Nature Trust would make their representations either jointly or separately
I see.
themselves.
Okay.
When we work as the Heritage Parks Federation, we sort of just concentrate on the conservation of the parks.
All right.
That's our task then.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think
Tamsin.
so. Unless anybody else has any questions, but I think that's enough of a discussion, possibly. Thank you so much, Martin, for giving this online talk. I hope everybody enjoyed it and that it inspires you to
come and give us a hand.
Yes, give us a hand and be an active citizen in looking after our natural heritage.
Great fun.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening. Thank you. You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you in the next one, hopefully. Bye.